February 19th, 4 o'clock. We've got other meetings this afternoon, lots on our plate, so let's get at it. Motion on the minutes. Seconded. All those in favor, contrary, carried. Our next meeting is March 4th. And the first item is an application by Harjeet Sandhu for the rezoning at 51111 Bird Road from school and institutional S1 use to small scale unit housing zone. James Nadowich and Josh Reese. We got the report, so any highlights on it, James?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, there we are.
I have nothing further to add. However, I would like to provide a brief highlight. The purpose of this application is to rezone the southern 30.48 meters of 11111 Bird Road from the school and institutional use zone to small-scale multi-unit housing zone to increase the economic value of the site for refinancing purposes. It is the city's intention to establish a trail network along the back of the property consistent with the OCP and city's trail strategy. The city has previously acquired lands for this purpose immediately to the east of the subject property, and it is the city's intent to continue to acquire lands for the purpose as they become available. The backlands of the subject site are subject to a right-of-way in favor of BC Hydro, which prohibits buildings within the rear of the property. Staff recommend denial of the proposed rezoning of these lands for residential use as it is inconsistent with the OCP as a whole and the Richmond Trail strategy. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions here? All right, we'll start with Carol.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, so on page PLN 14, you clearly map out where 11091 Bird Road is and 11111 Bird Road is. Why did we allow the back 100 feet in, I think it was 2000, where is it here, 2000, there's been so many, like this is from 1993 when it was bought to 94, 2003, 2010, 14. It's a very big file on this property. But why did we allow that backland to be included to 11111 Bird Road? Like what was the, did we not know then that that was going to be part of the agricultural or the pathway, the parkway?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, those lands were ultimately consolidated and then subdivided separately. So the ownership of the two properties side by side, they've been subject to a series of applications over the last 35 plus years. Ultimately, the current property ownership and boundaries as identified on PLN 14 is the current matrix or arrangement of the property.
So the back 100 feet of 11091 was allowed to be combined with 11111 Bird Road, right? Like, I'm having a hard time understanding why we would do that, because if we know it's going to be a pathway.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, this was ultimately a lot line adjustment, which doesn't require approvals from the approving officer. So I believe that the reason that we see the current arrangement as such is that a lot line adjustment occurred.
Yeah, and in 2023, they were granted a building permit to build on 11111 Bird Road, but only on the front part of the parcel, right? And they've chosen not to use that permit.
Sorry, could you say that again?
On 2023, the building permit was granted. It's stated on, I think it's page.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that permit was just confirming the construction was in accordance with the city's zoning bylaw for that property.
Yeah, it's on page 10. In February of 2023, a building permit was issued as a revision to, so that wasn't a building permit to build, that was just to align the lot.
That permit was to confirm the building as constructed was constructed in accordance with BC Building Code and all appropriate zoning.
Okay, now I understand. So it was the existing building.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much.
A couple of questions myself on this, and I understand the applicant wants to. This whole area has been evolving and has a lot of history, is it not? That has really, and to be quite frank with you, we've not paid a lot of attention to it.
Through the chair to the chair, I would say this area has been it has a history of larger single-family lots.
Yes.
The subject property in particular does have a 35-plus year history with the city in terms of permits and applications that have been considered at various points by city council.
We also have 3 stories over there as well, on the south side, don't we? So that got out of hand.
Through the chair to the chair, I believe what you're referring to are some of the land use contract homes that may have been constructed in
There's
the
still
area.
3
that
stories.
has-
Doesn't matter what they are, there's still 3 stories. What density did we, given along on the north and south side of Bird Road, there would be what I call hotels there. What density did we give? Were they all land use contracts? There's some, if you walk step by step from east to west, there's some huge buildings in there. Makes Blundell Road look small. Do we have a minimum density that we've given on redevelopment there?
Through the chair to the chair, in these instances, any rezoning applications that we have seen in this area have typically involved subdividing the lots into 2 single-family lots, consistent with our zoning for what was our RS1D zoning and which is now our RSM zoning. So the intention is that any future development of these lots would be developed in a manner consistent with our current small-scale multi-unit housing or single-family development.
So the lot size coverage that we've granted over the years has changed. And right now it's what, at least 70%?
Through the chair, to the chair, currently it's 0.6 applied to the first 464.5 square meters and then 0.3 applied to the remainder.
3, okay. No, I think we have to look at reality, what's there. You've got to walk the walk over there to find out what's going on. Anyhow, Michael, I think Andy, sorry.
Thank you, and through the chair. First of all, thanks for the report. A lot of history going on there. Now, you mentioned something about the rezoning would increase the value of the land. So I think I get that concept that if you rezone the back portion, theoretically it would be worth more. Although, just to be clear, and you've stated it, nobody can build anything in that area because of the hydro lines, right? So isn't it also about having that land included in the calculation for the buildable space and the density on that lot? Because if you add on the back 100-foot buffer, obviously the lot is bigger and it factors into the calculation for what someone can build.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, that is correct. The applicant has stated that the purpose of the rezoning is for refinancing purposes, but ultimately this would provide for a greater density to be used in that southern portion of the property.
Sure, and those 2 things both make sense. The trail that runs behind it, I actually did drive out there today and looked at the front and drove around to the back and wiggled my way in through a parking lot, and there's a lot of concrete in the back of that actually. So I understand the trail is still part of the official plan, but considering the property that has to be acquired, the trail connections like on number 5 road where there's commercial property and Shell Road where there's a railway line that's still active, that's a very long-term plan, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, correct. It is a long-term plan. These lands are identified in the OCP for Parks and Trails Network, but it is a long-term strategy to ultimately be able to acquire those lands and complete the connection.
Yeah, so it makes sense, but it is long-term, so I understand that too. The rezoning that happened with the neighbors back in, I think, 1993 is, an unfortunate circumstance, I think, looking at it today, because, provides an inconsistency with how council, although a totally different council, totally different staff, but I like to, apply the rules consistently when we can. So my last question is there a way to, since nothing is going to be built on that 100-foot buffer, it's all a matter of calculating density and square footage. Is there a way to, for instance, the neighbors would get to calculate that and use that buffer in their calculations, and this applicant would not if it's not rezoned. So is there a way to work with the applicant to reach some kind of compromise in terms of allowable density without rezoning the back 100 feet or not?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, staff did have early discussions with the applicant on an arrangement such as I believe what you're speaking to, where we would rezone instead the front portion of the property to consider a modest increase in density in exchange for the transfer of the lands in the rear of the property to the city for parks purposes. Through those discussions, however, the applicant was not agreeable to that approach, which is why the application is before you today as a denial.
Okay, thank you.
Just while you brought that up, on page 13, before I go to Councilor Liu, the 2010 Richmond Trail Strategy, can we get a copy of the original documents from 2010? Okay, can somebody find those and have them circulated? I think it's something we should have.
Through the chair, we did provide a copy of the trail strategy and map as attachment.
That's not the 2010 one.
As
The one that
attachment.
was done in 2010.
We can certainly,
I'd like to have that document, not only for this particular, but for the whole thing. If we have a trend, things are evolving and things are changing, and what was isn't necessarily today. So I think we need to have that information. We can't fall back on saying, well, it does meet the trail strategy. Trail strategy has changed long before your time, but I was around, and it's probably changed, say, 5 or 6 times. So I'd like the original document that was passed by council in 2010.
we can certainly work with
Okay,
our.
thanks
parks
very
department
much,
on
and
that.
circulate to all members of the committee. Thank you. Okay, Alexa, sorry, there you go.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the report. And, you know, the way you've laid it out makes a lot of sense. Now, the original date of this is back in April. And so since then, the rules have changed on what they are allowed to put on the residential portion of the land. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, that's correct.
So previously, they would have been allowed to have a single-family house with a suite,
A single-family home with a secondary suite, yes.
and now they're allowed
Up to 4 units,
fully stratified.
fully stratified.
Okay, thank you. I guess maybe if we hear from the
Yeah,
applicant, then we'll
That was
be able
gonna
to consider more. Okay, thank
Let's do
you.
questions here first. Anybody else around the table with staff? You okay, Jack? Michael? Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Are you, Sandu is here at the back. Thank you very much. Come on forward. Thank
you.
Thank you.
I have some material to distribute.
Okay, well, just pass them up here and we'll circulate them around. Maybe
I
the
have
clerk,
10
the clerk.
copies. Will that be sufficient?
Well, we only need 6 for now, and the clerk will take them from you, and we'll, here. Have a seat, please. Your mic is live.
All right.
Thank you. Make sure staff get one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, fellow councilor members. I have given a copy of what I'm going to be discussing to save everybody from taking notes. One correction which I would love to do, the date is February 18th. It's February 19th, so that's just a nuance. So to start with, I'd like to thank the members of this committee for the opportunity to come before you today. Even though staff is not in favor of this rezoning request, I still like to thank them for the meetings and discussions I've had with them to date. Accompanying these submissions are 2 previous staff reports that I'll be referencing occasionally throughout my submissions. And they're the report to council from Ron Mann that's dated July the 7th. This pertains to a rezoning similar to mine for 2 properties adjacent to us, 11051 Bird Road and 11071 Bird Road. There's also a report to committee from Ron Mann, Director of Planning, dated June 28, 1994, and that pertains to a prior rezoning request by myself. Also, there is a BC assessment that is attached for 11091 Bird Road, which I will reference for in terms of evaluating the parcel of land through my submissions. A number of members on this committee know me. However, for the benefit of those that might not be familiar with me, my name is Harjeet Sandhu. I'm 50 years of age and I've grown up and lived in Richmond my entire life. The property that is subject of this rezoning request was purchased by my parents in 1988, and that time the property was heavily forested with a small rancher house. My parents and I cleared the foliage from the property and constructed a new house that is presently still standing, and we eventually occupied the premises in 1990. I lived at this property until 1998, at which time, due to personal issues with my dad, my wife and I moved out onto our own, and I had an estranged relationship with my dad from then on, and I avoided contact him with at all cost. The staff report makes mention of various building code infractions that occurred that were entirely undertaken by my dad, and I was not a party to them. My dad has passed away in July 2023. And with myself being the only child, I'm now assisting my mom with the management of this property. Through the course of my submission today, I will use the following definitions to identify the property, which is the civic address of 11111 Bird Road, and these are going to be similar to the definitions that are used by the staff in the report. The lot is an L-shaped lot with the back portion being the wider part. The term southern portion will be used to refer to the front portion of the property that is currently zoned residential, and its dimensions are 97.5 feet by 223 feet deep. The term northern portion will be used to refer to the back portion of the property that is the subject of this rezoning application. It's currently zoned school and institutional use, and as correctly identified by staff, no structures can be built on this portion of land regardless of the zoning, because it's encumbered by a BC Hydro right-of-way. As identified by staff, there's a tract of land that acts as a buffer that is owned and maintained by the city. Now, in order for this land or tract to be continuous from Number 5 Road to Shell Road, it would require the purchase of a portion of 3 residential properties, so mine is one of them, and this is to the west of the tract that's currently owned. It would also require the negotiation of a right-of-way for the public with the CN rail line through their property, which contains an active railway in order to get access to Shell Road. It would also require the purchase of a portion of a parking lot of a commercial property, which is to the east of this tract, and that would facilitate access to Number 5 Road. Members of this committee have a staff report that's dated February the 3rd, 2025, which is quite detailed, but there is a glaring omission that's left out of this report, and this is one of my main arguments that I'm putting forward for this committee to approve this rezoning application. What this staff conveniently fails to mention is that in 1993, the owners of 11051 and 11071 Bird Road applied for and granted their request to rezone their northern portion of their properties to residential use in order to permit additional square footage to be constructed on their southern portion. This is the City of Richmond rezoning application, file number Res 93-076. So not one, but 2 properties were permitted to do exactly what I'm asking for. I will now be quoting directly from this report to council that's dated July the 7th, 1993. Again, this is from Ron Mann, the Director of Planning, and this can be referenced on page 3. The existing BC Hydro right-of-way is long-standing and likely to be phased out. Number 2, the city does not have a policy to acquire a 30.48 wide buffer from Shell Road to Number Road, but has acquired additional lands to the west on an ad hoc basis. Number 3, should the owners of the 3 remaining residential lots, again, this directly references my northern portion of my property, and I'm assuming it counts 11051 and 11071 Bird Road as one property since they were in the process of subdividing into 2 lots at that time. Now, this is west of the city-owned buffer to provide their own buffer by retaining the use of land under the BC Hydro Way. No overriding city or community goal, emphasis added, would be adversely affected thereby. Subsequent to that, those 2 properties were permitted to have their back portion rezoned. They were permitted to then have that square footage taken into the additional lot size to be taken into consideration for building a greater density building on the southern portion. So based on the above report, in 1993, and our neighbor's successful rezoning application, my parents purchased 11091 Bird Road, and we submitted a rezoning application. However, in a report to committee dated June 28, 1994, prepared by Dave McClellan, Manager Urban Development, City of Richmond, that conclusion stated the following. Number 1, the rezoning is designed to allow an existing dwelling at 11111 Bird Road. So my dad had constructed a roof over a deck that resulted in us exceeding the floor area ratio. So that's the legal situation at that time. And this would then allow to be brought into conformity. Number two, the zoning of the site will make it more difficult to ensure an adequate buffer between industrial and residential land uses and will make it difficult to acquire a continuous trail system through section 25-5-6, end quote. And this is on page 4. Now, my parents and I were extremely disappointed that when we brought forward a rezoning application, that it was even though it was less than a prior year that the two other property owners were permitted to rezone their northern portion, and the staff report made direct mention that if the other 3 remaining properties provide their own buffer, it would be acceptable with no overriding city policy or community goal being overridden. If we fast forward to today, this rezoning application is the same request as in 1994. And the reasons staff have permitted for denying this application are also essentially the same, and I will paraphrase them and respond to them. So the first point they make is that the additional floor would result in a building form that is notably different from that of the adjacent properties and unlikely to be accommodated within the existing setbacks and height restrictions of the RSM/L zoning. In regards to these items of concern, again, just for argument's sake, the ceiling heights for the current structure on the first floor are 9 feet, on the second floor they're 8.5 feet. So if any additions are done, I have the flexibility of decreasing the ceiling height to the minimum code requirements of 8 feet. And since the grade of the lot has increased significantly in 1989 during the building of this house, I also have the option of being able to have sunken floors to any new additions are done. And lastly, we also have the option of a flat roof if any additions are done. Now, the southern portion of this property that can be constructed upon is 21,638 square feet. So that's 97.5 feet by 222 feet deep. The maximum lot coverage in the current zoning is 45%. So that's the maximum footprint of the house. So therefore, the footprint of the house that falls within the maximum lot coverage would be 9,773 square feet. So that's 21,638 times 45%. Now, if you double that for a second-story house, then the total square foot that could be constructed without exceeding the permitted lot coverage would be 19,400 square feet. The constraining factor here will not be lot coverage, but floor area ratio, otherwise sometimes referred to as FAR, thus thereby requiring the square footage to be far below this, no pun intended, and thereby we would not be exceeding the maximum site coverage or lot coverage as a concern that staff raised in their report. As far as side yard setbacks, I cannot even believe this has been raised. Since the original house was built in 1989, the lot's actually been increased by width by 19 feet. I believe that I don't need to say anything more in regards to side yard setbacks being an issue with that point. I want to stress and reassure this committee that if they do approve this rezoning application, that the requirement for seeking a building permit will ensure that any proposed additions to the existing structure will conform to the neighborhood and be fully accommodated within the current setbacks and height restrictions of the current zoning. With all that said, in the end, it might very well prove that the existing building bylaws will not be able to be accommodated with the existing structure and the additional square footage of 4,600 square feet. In that case, I will just have to settle for a lesser amount being added, and I'm perfectly agreeable to that. Now, I would like to point out that staff was not presented with any drawings or plans, and those reasons I will explain shortly. Another point that staff brought up is that the park and trail also acts as a buffer to provide an appropriate level of separation between the residential uses along Bird Road and the industrial uses to the north. The City of Richmond does not have any bylaw that requires a buffer between industrial and residential land uses, or any two different land uses for that matter, within city boundaries. And I stand to be corrected here on that. There are numerous instances all throughout the city where two properties that have different land uses are adjacent to each other. One has to look no further than my neighbors at 11071 and 11051 Bird Road, where their entire property is zoned residential and it abuts a property that is zoned industrial. A buffer between industrial and residential land uses is nothing more than a mere luxury. It is not a requirement. Additionally, by not being able to construct any structures on the northern parcels of land because of the BC hydro encumbrances, a so-called buffer zone is achieved. Whether this is privately held or owned by the city, whether it is zoned residential or school institutional use, the effect is the same, a barren tract of land. If you flip to page 6, I will address the third point that's brought up, that the proposed rezoning of this area for the residential use would restrict the city's ability to secure a long-term public trail network and access in the area. So below is a picture, the first picture I present, it's a picture of the northern portion that's in question here. And this is us standing on one side of the property looking to the east. So again, I'd ask all committee members to reference those pictures. They're on page 6. Now, the next picture, yes, sure. Oh, there you go. The next picture shows what the northern portion would look like if it were to be rezoned residential.
No, carry on.
Do you notice any difference between those two pictures? Sure, go ahead. The pictures are identical, and I'll tell you why. Because nothing will change on this parcel of land, because no structures are permitted, regardless of what it's zoned. It is completely disingenuous of staff to simply state, and I'm going to quote, "The proposed rezoning of this area for residential use would restrict the city's ability to secure a long-term public trail network and access in the area without providing any further basis for reaching that conclusion." If by restrict, staff is meaning that the city will be permanently barred from extending the city-owned buffer, then that's already the case. The mere fact that 11051 and 11071 have their back portion zoned residential automatically precludes the city from purchasing the northern portion of those two properties, and thereby nullifies the city's ability to have a continuous trail from Number 5 Road to Shell Road. And hence, that argument should no longer be used as an argument to deny our request for rezoning. If the city can purchase the northern portion of 11051 and 11071 Bird Road after it's been rezoned residential, then obviously the city can purchase our northern portion as well after it's been zoned residential. I will contend that the city by no means is restricted in purchasing this property in the future if this zoning request is approved. The process for the city to purchase this parcel, if it's rezoned residential, could be or would be as follows. The city will enter into a purchase agreement for a set price for the parcel of land. The city will approve a subdivision application to permit the back parcel to be separated from our southern portion and be attached to the city's existing owned buffer strip. And lastly, the city will issue a site-specific zoning for the remaining southern portion of Bird Road, my property, so that any structure that's remaining will be in compliance with the floor area ratio. The above process will be followed for when the city purchases the northern portion from the owners of 11051 and 11071 Bird Road. So therefore, it can also be done for our property. So I believe the correct verbiage to be using is not restrictive, but extra administrative steps will be required. In discussions with the planning department leading up to today's hearing back in September of last year, in a meeting with James Hanowich, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and another individual from the city of Richmond, it was suggested to me at that meeting that if I was willing to cede the northern portion to the city, then in return, staff would be willing to support a site-specific zoning for the remaining southern portion to permit the additional construction of the square footage. I'd like to take a minute to address why I'm not open to the proposal of ceding this parcel of land to the city of Richmond. I would just like to remind everyone here in this room that my parents paid for this parcel of land from the previous owner in 1993. The property next door to us, 11091 Bird Road, it does not have a northern back portion. So its depth is equivalent to the depth of our southern portion that's owned residential. And according to its latest BC assessment, which I have attached, it has a land value of $1,738,000. So if we divide this total lot square footage of 13,131, so the lot's 59.15 wide and 222 feet deep, I arrive at a price per square foot of $132.35. The parcel of land that's the subject of this rezoning is 15,663 square feet, 156 wide by 100 feet deep. The table below presents values for this piece of land, assuming that $132 could be the maximum selling price per square footage, which would be an unfair assumption for reasons I will be discussing shortly. And I've also included lower amounts in this table, just to provide an indication of what the value of this land is at different price points. I wholeheartedly concede it's completely unreasonable to use the same price per square footage for the land, for this land that's being used for 11091 Bird Road as the assessed value, because all of that land for 1111091 Bird Road can be constructed upon, whereas the subject parcel here cannot. Even if it's rezoned residential, no structures can be built upon it. So with that amount, the table above is just meant to show what the value of this property could be if it were priced at lower amounts, say 90 or a 75, the discount being appropriate based on the encumbrance that nothing can be built upon it. Even at the lower value, I would like this committee to appreciate the significant, and I quote, in donation, end quote, that's being requested from me when no such concession was requested from 11051 and 11071 Bird Road. Subsequent to that meeting, I received a phone call from Mr. Hanowich that Parks and Recreation would be interested in purchasing the northern portion, and I replied to Mr. Hanowich that I would be willing to engage in discussions. Further to that phone call, I received another phone call from Mr. Hanowich shortly thereafter advising that Parks and Recreation was not interested in purchasing the property at this time as they had other priorities. So realize where we now stand at this very moment. Staff is recommending not to permit this rezoning because it would restrict the city's ability to purchase this parcel of land for a continuous trail. However, when presented with an opportunity to purchase this parcel of land, the reply was it's not a priority. So with that said, that brings us to today. So now, I'd also like to point out,
Much more?
yeah, just 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Okay, I'd also like to point out that since 1988, no additional properties have been purchased by the city to extend this city-owned buffer, either to the east or to the west. So that's almost 4 decades of no movement on this continuous trail that's in the future. So with that said, that brings us today. This application was originally submitted by myself back in early 2024. Since that submission, the density bylaws have changed significantly. Whereas prior to these changes, we were only permitted 1 suite. With the changes, we are now permitted an owner-occupied dwelling plus 3 additional units. I agree that this rezoning application is identical to the one that was submitted and denied in 1994. I also agree that the reasons for staff recommending a denial are the same. However, what is different today between 1994 is that the lens that's available to this committee to use in gauging the appropriateness of this rezoning application. Today, cities are wanting to pursue sustainable increased density, and also there is a substantial lack of family-friendly rental accommodations. With that lens, I would like the committee to recognize the benefits this rezoning would bring. Benefits that were not tangible back in 1994, because none of those 2 issues were substantial concerns. We would be able to have 3 individual rental units where they'd be two would be 2-bedroom, family-friendly, so not studios, but 2 bedrooms. And we could have a third that could be a 3-bedroom, family-friendly rental unit. 2 of these rental units would be at ground level and they'll be accessible friendly. And there's substantial provision for on-site parking for the majority of these rental units. In all complete fairness to the staff, the proposed development drawings were never submitted to them to review or for additional insights, unfortunately, because our discussions were focused on the acquisition of this parcel of land by the city, either by ceding it or by purchase. When discussions down both these avenues came to a dead end, it's unfortunate that the staff and I never engaged in further discussions on the intended use of the increased density. I would respectfully submit that this planning committee not forego the opportunity to provide all of the above and be willing to consider granting the zoning request, especially when doing so will not impede the city's ultimate long-term goal of a continuous trail from number 5 Road to Shell Road for reasons that I've submitted. Thank you.
We'll need a copy of what you've given for the record.
That's right here.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There are some questions around the table here. Carol?
I thank you for your presentation and for being so organized. Did your family originally own 11091 and 1111 Bird Road?
No, the background on the story of purchases is 1988, my parents bought 11111 Bird Road. And building permit was issued in 1989, a house was built there. 11091 was owned by another owner. That house was built a year prior, actually. In 1993 is when my parents purchased 11091 Bird Road. And they owned both properties up until about 2003, I believe. And in 2003, they sold 11091.
Okay, so I'm just going to recap. So 11111 Bird Road.
Correct.
When your family bought it, did they own the dogleg? Did they?
No, they didn't own the dogleg. The dogleg used to belong to 11091.
Okay, and when
Yeah.
was that purchased?
11091 was purchased in 1993.
1993, okay. So, and then, so really, so when they built a new house at 11091 Bird Road, they decided maybe to help pay for the price of the build to sell off the back 100 feet to you? Or to-
No. My parents bought the whole portion. 11091 was with a dogleg.
Yeah.
So my parents bought the whole property.
Okay, so you own both properties?
Yeah, we owned both properties for about 10 years, correct.
And then you sold off 11091.
And in the process of selling, we attached the dogleg to 11111 Bird Road, and then we also took off another 10 feet or 17 feet.
Yeah, I can see, because you made it much, much wider.
That's right.
Yeah, on the pictures, you show that on the back of this dogleg.
That's exactly the back portion, yes.
Okay, why is it concrete?
That's something my dad had done over the course of owning it.
For what reason?
He didn't want to cut the lawn. And there was a lot of unauthorized construction that was done, and that was all removed, and that's what's left of the property today.
So whatever was built back there was removed, but you still got all this concrete
We still got all this concrete that needs to be removed still, correct?
on parkland?
No, it's not parkland, it's private property.
Okay, in 2010, the city came to you and wanted to purchase the 110 North lot.
Not purchase, if, I believe the narrative there states, there was going to be a right-of-way with an option to purchase at a nominal price.
And you know that, was that nominal price what just made your family decide not to?
I wasn't privy to those discussions at that time because that was during the time period where I was not talking with my dad.
Okay.
But from referencing pieces of paper I've seen, it was like almost $1, I believe.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at the green zone here. All of the properties to the east have obviously at some point been subdivided into 2 lots, houses have been built, and the backland has gone to the city. So you were saying that none of these since 1988 have been sold to the city, are you sure?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, the last time the city acquired properties to extend that the buffer zone
Yep.
was in 1988. At that time, I believe they acquired 5 or 6 of the back portion belonging to the properties to the east of us.
And you were assuming that would be at a nominal price because it's parkland?
No, that, I don't know what the price was. I'm assuming it would have been at a fair market price at the time. All I know is at that point, city sewer was extended into all of the remaining Bird Road as part of that. Actually, if you refer to the 1993 staff report, or report to committee that I tabled you, it actually does provide a history on the development of that parcel from 1970 to 1993.
Okay, if the city was to come to you tomorrow and say, yep, we'll buy that back 100 feet at a nominal price, would you sell it so you can move forward with your development?
That's the reason why I put forward the value of the property. That's a substantial amount that we're being asked to give up. And I think it's unfair because the other property owners were never asked that at all. And I value the property to be at almost close to $1 million with a substantial discount I put forward in that table.
For just the 100 feet at the back?
100 by 150, 15,000 square feet at $70, at 50, it's just the way the math works out. It works out to a significant number.
And what would it be worth if the zoning stayed the same and it was parks and schools?
I believe it would, sorry, say that one more time.
If it was like what it is now, which I think is parks and schools, right?
Well, actually, if you refer to my submissions,
No, it says here that you want to rezone from school and institutional use to small-scale multifamily. So what would the sale be for that 100 by 150 feet on the north portion if it was remained school and institutional use?
What would be this price? I don't know what the price would be. We haven't been able to do a fair market assessment. So that's why I presented numbers based on property next door, where it is residential and they can construct on all of the land. I arrived at a number of 132. So if we work backwards from that and we apply a discount then, because there's no construction that can be done on this, I had $90 thrown in there per square foot. I went down to $75. The price was coming out to $1 million.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask some questions to staff. Thank you for your report.
Okay.
Okay. Carol? Andy?
Thanks, and through the chair, thanks for being here today, and thanks for the information. You provided a lot of information. I just want to ask, I think, 2 questions. If I understand you right, on the back portion of the property, which you can't build on because of the right-of-way, and we've discussed that, you're not opposed to selling that. It's a matter of reaching a price that works for you in your mind, and that's a fair and reasonable price. Is that a fair assessment?
You know what? It would be a reasonable fair market price. I'm open to that by all means. That was and actually it was kind of ironic that staff came here and said we purchased properties as they became available. I indicated to staff that my property is available for purchase late last year, and the reply was, we have other priorities.
Sure, yeah, I understand that. I just want to make the one point that you're not opposed to that. Of
Yeah,
course,
no, absolutely not.
price is always a sticking point when we're selling property.
If I get fair market value for it, I'd be happy to have that money in my bank account.
Yeah, and that's an interesting discussion to have because of the limitations on the land itself, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert in that. I just want to confirm one other thing, though. I think if I'm hearing things right in your presentation, the real second priority or first priority is the density that's allowed in the remaining buildable portion of that lot, right?
Not only the density, but the opportunity that now presents itself that wasn't available prior to these
Right.
new suites being allowed. Yeah,
Right, Bill 44, 47, yeah,
Exactly.
that's changed the
Yes.
playing field.
yeah.
Okay, that's a fair summary then, those 2
Correct.
major points? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay. You want to stop. There's a lot of
Thank you.
we're done with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's a lot of unanswered questions, and obviously, things have changed, as I was alluding to earlier. I'm wondering if we shouldn't postpone this particular development for 2 months so that we got new information from the applicant. There are a series of unanswered questions. There's some other information that I'd like to be able to sit down with what the applicant can do today and bring it back probably in April or May. I don't know if there's is there an urgency for staff on this one to be done?
Through the chair, the reason that this application was brought forward for consideration today is to, as the applicant had indicated, and we could not come to an agreement. I do believe that should the proposal be referred back to staff for more information and to come back to you, that 2 to 3 months would be insufficient amount of time. We would require additional drawings, materials from the applicant in order to be able to further any discussion about rezoning of the property in line with the information that he's provided to committee today.
Well, why would we need more drawings when we've got an application in front of us? My question is to answer some of these things that are the innuendos and the things that don't jive. You offered to buy it, you offered not to buy it. Doesn't make, we've got an issue around the table here to handle it. Now you're telling me not. I want you to address those. You can do it in the next 10 days and come back and give us an memo, and we'll bring it back on the table, and then we will discuss it. We're the ultimate decision makers. You know, I don't want to postpone this, and I don't want bureaucracy on this. Obviously, I was around when that whole area, and it was a mess, and it's a mess today, okay? And we need to correct whatever we have to do. I'm not saying we approve it, but we've got issues still to come if people wish to decide. That's just the way I would see it. I don't know how other members of the committee see it, so I'm going to go to Alexa and then Carol. Sorry, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a good idea. I also think that the city has goals. We'd like a trail in the back. I think the owner, the applicant has some goals now that there's some new possibilities on the table of being able to go to 4 units and what that could look like and what makes the most sense for his family and everything else. I also know that the city, we as a council have goals that we'd like, you know, affordable rental housing, different opportunities and a chance to see what's possible here. I don't know that we need to like point fingers and beat up on somebody that worked here in 1993 and go and find them and
You beat up on me. I would-
go and hang them up over it. But I think we'd probably like to have staff work with the applicant and move forward to something more. I don't know if how like refined the drawings need to be, or if like there can be discussion within, you can do the math of the setbacks and the new height that we've allowed, because we've gone to 10 meters now. We recently changed that, right? So you can go to a 3rd story. I've driven in that neighborhood. It looks like lots of people live in lots of houses there. There are like 8 cars in front of every driveway, it seems. So I think that lots of things could work in that neighborhood. And I also think that we as a council have other goals. Like we'd love to see that back piece of property remediated and not be that weird concrete skating rink. So like I think staff could probably come to some new answers with the applicant.
Be some answers. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know if it's a referral to necessarily,
Postpone it.
well, maybe they can get together and come
Well,
up with.
yes, we'll give direction to staff.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if committee is looking for additional information in terms of Park's ability to acquire the property, that can be done through simply tabling this application. If the intent is that we look at what may be possible in terms of alternatives to a straight acquisition, I would suggest that this is a referral back to staff. Rezoning the property does uplift the value. The exchange of that type of approach is typically dedication to the city. This is how we achieve parkland in many other parts of the city, as well as road dedications. So in terms of direction from committee, I think it would relate to what is the ultimate goal here. If it's simply to receive more information about park acquisition and where this property sits within the priority list, that can be provided to committee via a memo. If the intent is for us to work with the applicant to see what, if any, other arrangements may be possible to facilitate redevelopment of the front portion of the property and acquisition of the backlands by the city, then I would suggest it be a referral back to staff.
Go ahead.
I like the final option.
To refer back?
Redevelopment and acquisition conversation, refer back.
Well, okay, that's, okay. All right, you done? Okay, Andy? No, I'm the chair. Excuse me. Mr. Hobbs, you're on the
Okay,
floor.
thank you, through the chair. I just saw hers flashing.
Yours is too.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the comments Councillor Liu just made, and actually Mr. Craig as well. I think I would prefer to see a referral back to staff. I think the park issue and the backland issue and the redevelopment issue, they're all intertwined and go together. So I have so many questions and thoughts, even with the new information, that when it comes back, I'd like all of that information to be answered. It might take some time because that will probably be decision time for us, and I don't want to have to refer it back again. So I'd recommend going with referral to staff on those 2 issues that were outlined. Thank you.
All right, Carol.
Well, I'm not sure referral is needed. I have some questions I'd like answered. The applicant for his parents said that the city has not purchased any of the backlands since 1988. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry. There you are. Oh, come on.
Through the chair. Sorry. Through the chair to Councillor Day. That's correct, but this has been a long-term goal of the cities to acquire these lands. However, it has been since that time, since any additions have been added to.
Okay, so I'm looking at the overview map on page 15, and it shows all these houses built, and the very neat line that goes across the back. So were all of these houses built prior to 1988?
Through the chair to Councillor Day. I guess I'm going to kind of go on a brief history of kind of how that linear strip was created. In 1978, the land under the right-of-way was all privately owned. In that year, the industrial property to the north, those owners negotiated a land use contract with the city, establishing a buffer zone with title vested in the city along the southern 100 feet for a linear distance of approximately 450 meters. So that was predominantly how that linear strip came to be. This left 115 meters east to Number 5 Road and 195 meters west to Shell Road to be dealt with if and when development took place. And so the buffer strip has been added through development and purchasing throughout the years. Predominantly that came to be through that land use contract with the industrial use to the north.
So that helps clear things up. So all those houses were there, and then when the industrial area came in, then they had to give the 100 feet to the city.
Through the chair, Councillor Day, that is correct.
Okay, perfect. So was that land acquired by the city through market value or nominal price as was listed by the applicant?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we'd be happy to answer that as part of any subsequent information to council, as we don't have that information on hand for you today.
Okay, so, because I just assumed that it was the houses that gave up the 100 feet, but I'm wrong. It was actually, so then it's a weird dogleg. Like, why were then the 1, 2, 3, 4 properties, 5 properties to the west, their property line was much further back? Was it always that way? Or, like I'm just curious that, why would the industrial land be here and then the residential be an extra 100 feet? Why was that?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we can certainly provide you with that information on the full history of the extent of those properties. To the best of my knowledge, those properties were always that length, essentially.
Oh, okay, so I think that's where the confusion lies. Okay, so then the 2 properties that the applicant mentioned, which is 11051 and 11071, have houses, and it looks like a lot of stuff built in the back 100 feet. Has the city worked with them at all to get the 100 feet into the buffer zone?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, to the best of my knowledge, the city has not approached those properties about purchasing the rear of them. The use of those properties are still subject to the hydro right-of-way, where no buildings and structures are to be erected or located. But that is, again, subject to the hydro right-of-way.
Because it looks like there's stuff back there. And it looks like, I think I see 4 roofs.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, according to city records, there are no permits authorized for any construction in the rear of those properties.
Maybe later Mr. Hobbs could clear us in. Apparently he went there yesterday. Okay, and the other questions, sorry. This is really a complicated one, I must say. So this cement in the back of the property, it looks like there was buildings there at some point. Is that true?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that's correct. At one point in time, there were multiple buildings on the property. One of the reasons why the site was identified as having a number of unpermitted structures on the property that were subsequently removed as a result of by law enforcement and court action.
Court action. Wow, what a mess. Okay, well, okay, so what would the nominal value be if the city was to make an offer? This gentleman's asking for $1 million for the 100-foot by 150-foot north property. What is nominal to the city?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, as Mr. Craig had indicated, should this application be referred back to staff, that our typical practice would be to receive these lands as dedicated fee simple lands to the city as part of a consideration of an overall rezoning of the property. As far as a straight up acquisition of the property, again, I would have to defer to being further information being provided to council so that we can run those numbers accordingly.
Yes, which is exactly what the industrial properties did to the north. They wanted to redevelop, so they gave those properties to the city, those 100 feet, at a nominal, probably a gift, so that they could redevelop on, I think it was Voyager Way. Yeah, well, I think we just need answers to the questions, because it just seems to me that, you know, what's good for one developer, i.e. the ones on Voyager Way, should be good for redevelopment of the property. I don't see any reason to rezone it to residential. I mean, it is what it is. It is a greenway that has obviously been paved and used as industrial or commercial over the years, and I certainly don't want to, I don't want to reward that. So I think that we offer them the same deal we offered the people on Voyager. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Just for clarity of committee, the application that's on the floor is to rezone just the northern portion, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, which there are some issues with. The applicant is not asking to rezone the southern half or southern portion, correct?
At this time, no.
Okay, but Mr. Craig was indicating that there might be a rezoning. Has the applicant approached staff to ask for rezoning at the southern portion or just the northern portion? I'm trying to debate whether we need rezoning or just get further information.
Through the chair, at this point in time, the applicant has applied only to rezone the northern portion of the lands for a residential use.
Which we can't do because of,
What Mr. Craig has put forward would be referral back to city staff to look at the whole of the property and mainly rezone the southern portion of the site in exchange for dedication of the land in the rear of the property to the city.
or some agreement.
Correct.
Okay, all right, I just want to make it clear around the table here on what we're voting on. Or what Councilor Liu was suggesting in terms of, maybe, are there any other specific things you wish in that referral to the staff?
No, unless you have any
Come on,
additions or adjustments you would.
Carol? I'm gonna let
So,
you-
to be clear, if the applicant was to make an application to rezone the southern portion of the property to something that would be aligned with Bill 44, then we would expect them to give us the back 100 feet, correct?
I don't think we can assume anything. It would be negotiated. Don't stick your neck
It
out
don't need
like
to be
that.
rezoned because it's Bill 44, it's, yeah.
You know, be careful. Okay. The discussion would take place with regard to whatever arrangements that could be accrued at that time. Because we don't know what the
Well, I-
request is,
maybe-
what the offer is, et cetera.
I mean, obviously, if this gentleman wants $1 million for property that's zoned school and institution, he's nowhere even close to making a deal with the city. So it just seems to me, why don't we rezone it and suggest that he build on the front portion and the south portion and give us the back portion, and then everybody wins.
Okay, well, okay, thank you, okay. Check.
Well, I'd rather refer it back to staff to look at the whole situation and come up with options.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded then to refer it back to staff and come back with the options. Do we have a timeline? Let's say within 3 months, a report come back to us on?
Through the chair, we will bring this application back as soon as we can. I would not be able to put a timeline on it. In terms of process, we would need to do an appraisal to understand what the value of the back portion of the property would be. We would need information from the applicant in terms of how they intend to redevelop the front portion of the site. We would need to look at the existing condition of the backlands, what would be required in terms of remediation, given the unauthorized construction that has happened in that area. This would be a lengthy process. We would come back as soon as possible. I do not think 3 months would be sufficient.
So, okay, you're okay, it's your motion. Okay. Any further discussion, Carol? Sorry, go ahead.
I won't be supporting the referral back. It just muddies the water more. I think this should be denied, and staff should work with the applicant to do what is legally allowed to be done. Okay, this is a no-go, the way it is.
All right, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, I'm going to call the question on all those in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Dion, the contrary. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so it's been referred back to staff and dealt with, and we'll keep our eyes on it to when it should come back. Okay, the next item is a Seniors Advisory Committee work program. Claire Addison and Nafar Hadiati.
Just be
Oh,
me.
just you?
Yeah.
Alone? Anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any
Staff are
questions?
available to answer.
Seconded? All those in favor? Contrary, Carol?
One of the things in the report, which is great, is that seniors are to advise a city on initiatives. But how often do we actually ask them for their opinion? How many can you recall?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, throughout meetings, we do discuss initiatives that are occurring, such as the age-friendly activities, and also bring forward strategies such as at the January meeting, there was a draft wayfinding strategy that was brought forward. So advice to council and staff comes through feedback on presentations as well as discussions on updates on initiatives that are going forward. And comments that are brought forward from the committee. So there's a number of different ways that that advice is taken in.
Because it's very rare that they write an official letter to council, you know, I don't think I've ever seen that, except for maybe on the parking for the hospital. I would encourage council to ask specific questions of this group. The Seniors Advisory Committee is a really informative, engaged committee, and they have hundreds and hundreds of years of expertise and history in the city. And I don't think we use them near as much as we should.
All right, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor? Contrary, carry. Thank you. All right, the next one is the Richmond Youth Committee and Grace. Okay, with Claire then. Okay, anything to add?
Nothing to add to the report and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Seconded. All those in favor? Contrary, carried. Thank you very much. Okay, and the third one is the youth strategy. Again, you're on.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Nothing
I'm
to
happy
add.
answer any questions?
Questions? Okay, hang on here, Andy. There you go.
Thank you, and through the chair. Thanks for that report. One kind of thought I had, is around the stress percentage, the 52%, youth feeling stress, and the age group of 13 to 24, I thought was, pretty broad, because I think of youth sometimes being a little bit younger. So I just wondered if you had any comments about kind of dividing that group up into more like 13 to 18 and maybe 19 to 24. That's the first question. There might be a reason why they are together, so.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the age group for youth in Richmond was changed when the youth strategy was developed. The way that programming works is that, and services and initiatives are presented to the community, is that they are at times divided between those age groups, because that division does make sense in terms of services offered to youth. However, we do find it important to be able to support that wide age range in order to support youth transitioning to adulthood.
Okay, thanks for that. And I just wondered as well, with the strategic priorities in the report, which are good, I wondered if there, and it might not be broken down this way, but is there any correlation between youth that participate in some of those strategic priorities, people that are engaged, whether it's the arts or sports or whatever, versus people that aren't? Or is it really the group that's being measured are the people that are engaged and participating in things, and that would be even worse if the stress level is 52%. So the basic question is there any cohort or is there any breakdown between youth that are participating and engaged versus youth that maybe aren't as engaged?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, we don't have, it would be challenging to find out that kind of information, and we don't have that specific to that percentage of youth feeling stressed. But what we do know is that youth who are connected and engaged in the community do have more positive outcomes in terms of health and well-being.
Sure, and I guess the number of youth in the community, I think was 27,000, I think, in the report. So we do know roughly how many youth are participating in different things, but then there's a whole bunch of other things that we wouldn't have numbers on. So I guess increasing the engagement level is the key, one of the keys to decreasing that number of people feeling stressed or not happy. Thank you for that, though.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you, through the chair. Just one question. In regards to the strategic priority number 4, opportunity, there's a couple on there somewhat related. The 4.4 is about volunteer and paid opportunities for personal growth development. And then the 4.10 is involve youth in city initiatives such as sustainability and climate action projects. One of the remaining referrals that staff are working on is known as, missed it, the Green Ambassadors Program, and perhaps partnering with organizations like Youth Climate Corps or others. And I think there's a Q1 report coming our way. Is that what is referenced by the status being in progress, like looking for those types of partnerships? And if not, then what is in progress?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, that is one of the programs that we have been in conversation with city staff about. There are a number of other programs. For example, there's an employment readiness initiative that Parks, Recreation and Culture is working on as well. And there are a number of volunteer opportunities specific to youth in the city and with the city's partners as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Okay, the next is the application to amend the housing agreement bylaw in the Richmond Center Phase 1. And Mr. Newman is on here with, okay, I'm just, sorry about that. I only got one person.
Yeah.
on my list.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you for both of you for being here. Go ahead.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair. My colleague Kate Bedford is here to help answer
good.
questions if there are any.
Okay, hang on. We got Carol.
Yeah, so this is one of my least favorite applications years gone by because previous councils had approved this, these amount of units with, okay, 1,087 market ownership units and just 79 lemur units. And they're supposed to be operated by a nonprofit, but could they not be operated by the Richmond Housing Authority that we're putting together?
Through your worship, or through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Day, they could. That's something we would have to take back and look at.
Isn't that why we're building the Housing Authority, so that we can do exactly that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Day, I know we have a referral to look at that, and I know we'll be bringing that back.
Yeah.
So when will that come back?
Mr. Chair, that, excuse me, that's currently under development.
Well, we got to move a little faster. Victoria's pushing us. I think we better look at it a little faster. I'd like the 79 units to be referred back to staff to look at how we can deal with it.
I think we should. And the other thing is that I don't think they should be, I mean, it's only 79 units and, you know, Cadillac Fairview is going to make a small fortune from the 1,087 market ownership units. I think the least they can do is give parking included in the rent. So I would not be supporting that.
All right, anybody else? Oh, sorry, Lexa.
If I may, to staff, what we're voting on is the rates, not, which is commensurate with other rates across the city. So it doesn't matter who's running the show, we're agreeing on the rates right now. Is that correct? So if we were to run it ourselves, we would want these rates, wouldn't we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Liu, the report in front of you is to look at amending the existing housing agreement for the Richmond Centre to allow them to access the updated lemur rates. So in November of last year, staff put forward a report that identified the need, the economic need to adjust the rates to bring them into closer alignment with current economic conditions. That's the nature of this report, is to amend the existing agreement to allow the owner to have access to those higher rates.
Okay, and the housing agreement was already in place?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, same question, so thanks for asking that. I will be supporting it because it is about the rates and the housing agreements in place. Although I don't dispute it would have been nicer to have more and everything else, but that's done. And this is about the rates, so I will be supporting it. Thank you.
I'd like to vote on it separately. I'm fine with the new Lima rates, but I don't think they should be allowed to charge for parking. Yeah, no, it's number 2. So number 1 is Lima rates for rental. Number 2 is to enable owners of the Lima units to charge for use of parking. And number 3 is that the terms used to enable owners to charge for the use of parking for any.
Number 5 is just to go up the first, second, and third, to go up the Lima rate. We're not talking parking on number 5.
Somebody's got, you guys got a different agenda than I have?
We have the same agenda. No, turn the page the other way.
Yeah.
That's the item at the bottom of the page.
Oh, number 6.
Number 6 is on the second page.
Sorry, I could put them together.
Question on the housing agreement.
Yeah.
First and third reading. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you very
Okay.
much. On that item.
Number
Okay,
6.
the next item, Mr. Milman.
Tardif.
We have 3 recommendations on the next page. Okay. Anything to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing to add. This is my colleague Renee Tardif, who's done the work on this.
All right, Carol, you're on now for item number 6.
So, good. Item number 6, sorry about the confusion earlier. They all kind of blend together sometimes. So this is going to permit for all Lima units to charge for parking as endorsed by council. Is this only for Lima units that are close to transit, or does it also include Lemurs that are away from transit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Day. The report itself looked at the ability to charge for parking for the occupants of affordable housing units. What was being presented would be that it would be forward-looking, so we would not be applying the ability to charge for parking retroactively is the recommendation. That being said, in the case of Lansdowne specifically, there is, being a fairly recent housing agreement, there was a clause that references the opportunity to charge for parking subject to a council-endorsed policy, which, if this were supported, that would be picked up with this.
And if the Lima units are built away from transit, would they be excluded?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Day, no, the recommendation here is that we allow for the ability to charge for parking across the whole city.
Yeah, let me think about it in a minute, see what everybody else has to say.
I'll move the recommendation and I'll speak to it. I think we know with the new housing rules that people don't have to provide parking. And so if they do provide parking, they should be allowed to charge for it. I think we're in the business of creating some affordable housing for people. We're not necessarily in the business of creating affordable parking for people. I think parking's a nice to have and it's a great to have, but when it costs $100,000 to build a parking stall in some of these buildings, when you have to tank it and build it, and then you're rev limited to how high you can build your building, if we actually want anyone to build anything moving forward, we've got to let people charge for the parking and encourage people to not. When we build new buildings and people come in, they're given transit passes, they're given access to other things. We're requiring extra bike parking and more bike services and everything else. So, you know, I think we're trying to set up a community that can move around and get moved around without everybody having their own single-family car. And I think there will be options coming forward in some of these new builds with affordable housing with more car share options and those kind of things where people share a vehicle so that, you know, not everyone needs a car in their driveway in case they go to Costco. So thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, while following up on Councillor Liu's comments, which I agree with, I will be supporting option 2, the recommended option. I mean, parking, I realize we're trying to decrease the number of parking stalls around transit-oriented areas and multifamily developments. I realize that is the trend and it's going to happen, but there have been some developments in other jurisdictions where zero parking has caused its own issues. So I think the reality is there's always going to be need for some parking. You know, senior citizens might need it to get around. Other people might need it to move their children around. So the number of parking spots, I think, as the report lays out, is probably best determined by the market, and they will respond to the consumer demands. And I also believe that charging a reasonable amount of money for the parking spots that are provided is also reasonable, so I'll be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? On any question? All those in favor? Those opposed? Councillor Day and myself opposed. All right, managers' reports. None? Okay, we are going to. I'll be there. I'll come back.
To staff, do we have Councillor Heed and the presenter from Hub on Zoom? Yes, we do. Okay, perfect. Do you want to do a test with Councillor Heed just to see if he can hear us?
I can hear you.
Perfect, good, good to go. All right, call to order the Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting of February 19th to order. Do I have a motion on the minutes of January 22nd? All those in favor? Thank you. The next meeting is March 19th at 4 p.m., tentatively here in the Anderson Room. The first item, are there any agenda additions or deletions? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll move ahead to number 1. Disaster Resilience and Innovation Fund, North Dyke Preliminary Design Project Grant Application. And we have Jason Ho presenting to us today.
Madam Chair, nothing to add.
Nothing to add, okay. This is an application to the Disaster Resilience Fund for about $400,000. And do we have any speakers? We have Councillor Wolf, okay.
Thank you, through the chair. Just 2 quick ones. One is, I know this is just grant application phase, but in this design project, will it also include like how habitat compensation can be provided if the riparian management areas and other ESAs are impacted by these kind of super dike? Is that at all going to be factored into the application?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes. Part of the preliminary design project will identify the habitat impacts as well as potential compensation options.
Thanks. And then my second question through the chair. I know it's maybe not part of the application, but, or maybe, to do this work in this region of River Road, it's going to be significant, impacting a lot of people who use that for travel. I wonder if there's plans to open up Cambie Road all the way to where it meets River Road, which would help bypass the area that's identified in here as the Nelson to the train bridge. Is that at all factored into the kind of work that's needed to get to this project, the Cambie Road opening up? Or?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'm not entirely sure on the Cambie Road extension. However, transportation will be engaged as we go through the design process to incorporate any concerns or considerations on their end.
Great, thank you.
We have a speaker from Hub Cycling that wants to speak on this item. Oh, it's item 3. Oh, I apologize, it's item 3. Okay. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. Yeah, perfect. All right, all those in favor? Good. Number 2 is the Provincial Invasive Species Monitoring Update, the Northern Giant Hornet. This is just for our information.
Correct. Nothing further to add and available for questions.
Yeah, the giant hornet, northern hornet, can destroy 30,000 bees in a few hours. And they had this hornet, unfortunately, over in Nanaimo and down in Blaine, but I understand we haven't found any here in Richmond.
Through you, Madam Chair, correct.
Yeah, and Councillor Wolf, I think. Oh, Councillor who's first? Councillor Wolf's first, okay.
Thank you. Just again, in relation to kind of overview of all invasive species and how the city can keep up to speed on this and others, are we sending staff to next week's invasive forum that's held in New West?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, that's a good question. Councillor Al, you're next.
Yes, I just want to ask, so can you consider this to be a successful story? Because when I first read the report, I mean, wow, okay, this kind of thing is hard to contain. But, you know, at the end of the report, it seems that the risk is over.
Through the chair to Councillor Al, we would consider this a success, which is why we wanted to highlight the fact. It doesn't always happen with some invasive species. They are allowed to establish. In this case, it is a great example of how intergovernmental and cross-border communication work together can be established to promote a good outcome in when needed.
Yeah, good, thank you.
All right, do a motion and second. All those in favor? Excellent. Let's hope we can keep the nasty giant hornet out of Richmond. Okay, number 3 is the proposed speed mitigation measures on Dyke Road and London and Princess area. And we have Ms. Sanalia here talking to us, and you have something to update. I think you have a presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Staff have prepared a brief presentation in regards to the referral and through you to committee.
Yeah.
I'm happy to walk through an overview of our findings regarding Dyke Road.
Perfect.
Right. There we go. As a quick background, the city's traffic calming and speed mitigation process on local roads is a community-driven process, and that was the approach taken through engagement with residents along Dyke Road. Staff did conduct a traffic assessment of the road operations, and that technical data did not warrant any safety or operational changes. However, through consultation, there was support from area residents for a 30-kilometer-per-hour speed limit on Dyke Road, as well as the provision of traffic calming measures on Dyke Road as well. And those speed cushions, that has been approved by council earlier this month, and staff will implement those as the weather improves, and we're shooting for spring of this year. A recap of the traffic assessment that was conducted for Dyke Road. We identified Dyke Road as a local road. It has low volume and a narrow pavement width. As I mentioned, the traffic assessment based on speed and collision data did not warrant any changes on this road, but through our engagement, that was the opinion of the community. These images before you help to illustrate some of the conditions alongside Dyke Road. You can see that there are several parking areas that provide access to the waterfront. Dyke Road is often used as a scenic and recreational route, providing connectivity to the dike and also to the Bark Park. Dyke Road is classified as a shared roadway, meaning that cyclists can use the road, and there are signs to indicate as such. There is good utilization of the road by cyclists with an average daily volume of about 150 cyclists, and that does tend to increase as the weather improves. There was some discussion at committee regarding the road impacts and outcomes with different speed limits. This table illustrates the estimates with respect to travel time and safety at 50, 40, and 30 kilometers per hour. I'll just walk through those findings for each speed. At 50 kilometers per hour, if a motorist was traveling from Number 3 Road to London Road, that trip would take about 100 seconds. The outcome from a safety standpoint in the event that a vehicle at that speed does have a conflict with the cyclist, there would be about a 10% chance of survivability. at that speed. At 40 kilometers per hour, the trip takes an additional 25 seconds, and the chance of a fatality of a vehicle striking a cyclist at that speed is 50%. At 30 kilometers per hour, that same trip increases in travel time to an additional minute. However, the real safety benefits are in the results of a potential collision with a vulnerable road user like a cyclist, whereas the chance for survivability at that speed of impact of 30 kilometers per hour is 90%. So that is why Transport 2050 and Vision Zero both support 30 kilometers per hour on local roadways and roadways like Dyke Road that are shared with cyclists. And that was the support that we received from our consultation with the community as well.
Before you move on, can you just again say what from, I think it was London Road to number?
This travel time represents the distance from number 3 road to London Road.
Got it. Thank you.
Oops. We also heard some discussion around the potential for lowering the speed limit on number 2 road. We've taken a look at the conditions on this stretch of number 2 road south of Moncton Street. There are already existing traffic calming measures on this road with the provision of raised crosswalks. And that has helped to keep the speeds down. The 85th percentile speed indicates that the majority of traffic is traveling at 46 kilometers per hour or less. And certainly council can make bylaw amendments to reduce the speed, and staff can engage with area residents to seek out the level of support for such a speed reduction. And just in summary regarding Dyke Road, that consultation did occur with area residents in October. The outcome of that indicated support for the 30 kilometers per hour speed on Dyke Road, as well as the speed cushions that we will install in Q2 of 2025. And as committee is aware, staff also have a separate referral to look at the speed limits further east on Dyke Road at 30 kilometers per hour out to number 5 road. We wanted to bring forward the section out to number 3 road, as we heard from residents that there was support for that speed on that stretch of Dyke Road. And that concludes the overview, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Questions from committee about that? Councillor Liu, you have a question?
Thank you, through you to staff. Thank you for this. So originally when the people around Dyke Road were asked, just over half of them responded, and half of those people said that they wanted traffic calming. And since then we have put in, or we will be putting in the speed cushions. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to wait until the summer's over, after we've had a summer of the speed cushions, and see how things are going, see what the percentage of people riding or driving is, see how it has actually already impacted things. Because I know that on that stretch of road, it's a tailwind for a lot of cyclists. You're going to have a lot of cyclists going along that, and especially the pelotons of the grays and the silver bullets, the old guys in spandex. But they're going more than 30 kilometers an hour on their bicycles. And I can just see that if people are being required to drive 30 kilometers in their car and all the bikes blow past them, we're going to get all kinds of letters, and we're not going to like it. But I certainly agree with creating as much safety as possible. And you mentioned too then that in 5 years there were 14 total collisions. Were any of those with pedestrians or cyclists?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, no, they were not.
Okay, and what were they hitting?
Through the chair, the drivers were making errors with respect to turning. It was mostly, those collisions represent single vehicle incidences or 2 vehicles at an intersection.
Okay, so some people were just hitting stationary things?
Through the chair, I don't have the details before me, but single vehicle incidences or two vehicles, but no incident involving a cyclist or
So if they
pedestrian.
were turning, presumably they were going less than 50 at the time anyway.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, that's right. No collision data indicated speeding as a contributing factor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Councillor Wolf may have a question
Yeah,
for you.
thank you, to the chair. Just one question. On the lowering speed limit table, it mentions that the 30 kilometers an hour one is supported by Vision Zero and Transport 2050 for two reasons: for local roads and roads shared with cyclists. So the Dyke Road portion in this area is a road shared with cyclists. Is it also considered a local road, the Dyke Road portion?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, it is classified as a
Full
local
length.
road. That's
All the way
right, for
to
the
through.
full length.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we think we have a speaker. The staff can arrange for them to be online. Hello? Hello? Oh, there we
you hear
are.
me?
Hi. Want to introduce
Okay.
yourself and tell us what you're
Hi.
here to speak about?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jesse Lee. I am today representing Hub Cycling's Richmond YVR local committee. And I'd like to just present two arguments for lowering the speed limit on all of Dyke Road, at least to 40 kilometers an hour and ideally to 30. The first has been brought up already, which is that slower moving vehicles are safer and more comfortable for people cycling. And while it's true that there haven't been any accidents yet between a cyclist and a vehicle, keep in mind that a lot of the riders currently using Dyke Road are more experienced cyclists who are comfortable riding next to traffic. And people who are newer to cycling will be reluctant to bike next to fast-moving cars. We have to be considering the people who aren't cycling yet if Richmond wants to meet the OCP targets for rise in cycling uptake. Now, the second point I want to make is that people probably shouldn't be driving that fast down Dyke Road in the first place. At the last Hub meeting, one Hub member who lived in the area previously remarked that he saw a lot more cars driving down Dyke Road than really makes sense for the few number of destinations there. Our best guess is that there might be people who are rat running. In other words, they're trying to avoid traffic on Steveston Highway by going around via Dyke Road. But this practice disturbs local residents and users of the South Dyke Trail. By lowering the speed limit and putting in appropriate traffic calming measures, this practice can be discouraged since it would no longer be faster to race down local roads. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, does anybody have any questions of the speaker? Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee, appreciate that. Well, we've got a report in front of us. Do you want to receive it for information, or do you want to take any action? Okay, do I have a seconder? Okay, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that is passed. Thank you very much. I believe we have a couple of managers' reports.
Madam Chair, just an update on the Cambian Number 5 Road Intersection Upgrade Project. We were previously awarded $93,000 from ICBC as cost sharing, and so they recently let us know they reassessed the project and will be giving us another $43,000.
Wow, isn't that great? And I understand they reached out to us, didn't they?
That's correct.
Very good, very good. Counselor Heed is online, and he has a question. I'm not sure about one of the ones we've already voted on or something new.
It is one of the ones we already voted on, and I was just trying to raise my hand here. So the report that was brought forward by Sonalia and that we had a presenter on, we actually wanted some action on this, so I'm uncertain why the vote was to receive it as information versus taking some action on that. And I just wanted to clarify whether the recommendation was that we just receive it for information, because we're going to have to make a decision here. Clearly, the evidence is there of the lack of injuries or avoiding the injuries if we lowered it to 30K, and that's what we went out to consult the community with. Now, we're going with some measures to mitigate the speeds along there, as Councillor Liu alluded to. But again, I'm just wondering why we're just receiving this information. Is it just going to go into the abyss now, or is it part of a larger report that's coming to us on the overall mitigation for traffic calming measures around Dyke Road?
All right, let's the staff answer that question.
Madam Chair, we can certainly take direction on, from committee on which way to proceed. We can certainly include it in the broader report regarding lowering the speed limit on Dyke Road, and we anticipate bringing that forward next month.
To all of council or to this committee?
Through the chair, we can bring it back to committee.
Okay, so this is just the beginning, it sounds like.
So the point I want to make there, Sonalia, we are still going forward on putting in some of the mitigation, such as the speed bumps or whatever we want to term it as at this particular point. And that's what we voted on a month or so ago. But this will form part of a larger report with recommendations based on the consultation, not only with the community, but the data you provided on mitigating injuries in this particular area. Am I correct in assuming that that's what we'll be looking at when you come forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, we can take that on board as part of the subsequent report anticipated next month. With respect to the traffic calming measures on Dyke Road, those have been approved by council, and we're planning to install them as soon as the weather is conducive to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Heed. Good questions, you never know. Okay, there's another manager's report coming up.
Hello, Madam Chair. I'll be presenting an update on the Steveston Highway multi-use pathway construction. So the section between Shell Road and Gilbert, that has been completed. There's ongoing construction right now between Gilbert and Number 2 Road. Our contractor, Hexcel, is out there right now removing some of the concrete work and the curbing and doing some of the underground utility work, including drainage and street lighting. Currently, the curb lane is closed off full-time to traffic, and this section is anticipated to be completed in the second quarter of this year. The next section between Number 2 Road and Railway, that construction has just commenced on that section. Our contractor, Arcelon, is currently removing some of the concrete curbing, and that'll be followed by some of the underground utility works, including, again, street lighting and drainage coming up next. And this construction is anticipated to be completed in early summer.
So, wow, they're both coming up pretty soon. Okay, wonderful. Okay, that's good. A lot of people ask about that. Councillor Hobbs has a question. There we go.
Thank you, and through the chair. Not a question, just a comment between Railway and Number 2 Road. I know a lot of citizens had a lot of concerns about the hedge trimming and branch trimming and everything, and I just want to compliment staff on the responsiveness to people's concerns and getting out there and dealing with it in a way. I've heard some positive comments about the response, even though they're still not happy about the trimming, but they were positive about the city's response in about 3 or 4 cases, I think. So want to acknowledge that.
All right, I think we'll just leave it at that. Anything else? No other? All right, all those in favor? We are adjourned.